Good afternoon, members of the Committee of Constitutional Affairs and Decolonization, support staff, radio listeners, and those following this meeting by various forms of media. Welcome to this committee meeting number 2 of today, Tuesday, December the 13th, 2022. I would like to give a special and warm welcome to the representatives of the One SXM Association. We've established a quorum of 8 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I've received notice of absence from the MP William Marlin. Are there any other notifications from the floor at this time? I see no need. Thank you, members of parliament. And we have as agenda point for this meeting today, 1, the update regarding the submitted resolution from One SXM Association. And agenda point 2, a presentation regarding reparations, and this is IS number 699-2021-2022, dated March 23rd, 2022. We go over to agenda point 1. On March 1st, 2022, in the meeting number 2 of the Ad Hoc Committee Electoral Reform of the previous parliamentary year, we received a presentation from representatives of the One SXM Association on the issue of a referendum for St. Martin. On this same day, representative of the One SXM Association presented Parliament with the document Proposed Resolution for a Consultative Referendum on Independence, and this is IS 620 of the 2022 parliamentary year. Members, it's good to note that, as mentioned earlier, this meeting was originally held in the Committee of Electoral Reform. However, in consultation with the Chair of Parliament, I had suggested that this topic, as I had suggested before, considering the nature of what is being discussed and considering what the purpose of the Electoral Reform Committee, which is the Ad Hoc Committee Electoral Reform, was created to work on reforming electoral systems, so that's a very specific cause, whereas the Committee for Constitutional Affairs and Decolonization has to deal with the matters of constitutional nature, which we did feel it does apply. For that reason, we are now having this meeting in the Committee for Constitutional Affairs and Decolonization. On March 23, 2022, Parliament received a letter, IS 699, from the One SXM Association as a follow-up to their presentation of March 1st, inquiring on the next steps on their request for a referendum. At this time, I would like to give the floor to the President of One SXM Association, Ms. Dr. Rhoda Arundel, for her opening remarks and presentation. Dr. Arundel, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman.
And Dr. Arundel, if I can just say, we also had a notification, a notice of lateness from MP Gums. You have the floor, Dr. Arundel.
Okay, thank you. Again, good afternoon, members of Parliament and public of St. Martin, and whoever is listening or watching here and abroad. Mr. Chairman, honorable members of Parliament, we, the members of the One St. Martin, also known as One SXM Association, are grateful for this invitation to return to Parliament today to discuss the 2 agenda points you just mentioned. On March 1st this year, the One SXM Association appeared before the Ad Hoc Committee for Electoral Reform, indeed, with a request to Parliament to convene a consultative referendum on the matter of independence for St. Martin. Offering to do our part in tabling the referendum, we respectfully submitted a proposed draft for a resolution asking that the referendum address a sole question, yes or no to independence for St. Martin. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I recall the proposed resolution. Considering that the last referendum for St. Martin was held in 2000, and that a new generation of St. Martiners has not had a say about the island's constitutional future. Considering that a child born in 2000 could have voted in the last parliamentary election. Considering that a hallmark of any democratic process is for the people to be consulted on matters of public interest. Considering that Article 2 of the Constitution says that the consultative referendums are conducted at the initiative of Parliament. considering that St. Martin has exhausted all other viable statuses in previous referenda, and considering that the only other question to be put to the people is whether they want independence or not. The Parliament of St. Martin resolves to convene a consultative referendum on the matter of political independence for St. Martin. Parliament further resolves that the referendum shall have one question: yes or no to independence for St. Martin. The referendum shall be convened within the current parliamentary term, or at least simultaneously with the next parliamentary election. That was the referendum. Mr. Chairman, that proposal was tabled almost 8.5 months ago. At our last meeting, one of the questions raised by MPs was whether the issue of independence was enough of a public discussion to warrant Parliament's decision to table the referendum to consult the people on their future. Well, we have seen that not only is the issue of independence a very public conversation, it continues to be raised by the Honorable Prime Minister and other representatives of the people at different public fora. Acknowledging Parliament's demanding schedule and recognizing that a whole generation of young St. Martiners has not been granted this democratic right to choose what kind of constitutional status they desire for their islands, we are here again today as a follow-up to our presentation in March to ask the Parliament to let the people decide to freely determine the direction their future should take. We would also like to know what progress, if any of the committees or Parliament in general has made in initiating the process for a consultative referendum. In fact, does each member of Parliament not agree that it is important to consult the people at all on the matter like independence? What are the obstacles to convening such a referendum, and how can these be surmounted? Does the fact that we've had two consultative referenda between 1994 and 2000, a period of 6 years, not offer us a blueprint for the organization of another referendum 22 years later? If Parliament does not deem a referendum on independence necessary, in which other way does it believe the people, particularly the youth, can have a say in their constitutional future, especially considering the current situation? Perhaps we should ask bluntly, who is afraid of a referendum? Who is afraid of consulting the people? The irony is not lost on me that today we sit here in the House of Parliament as a result of the referendum in 2000. While some members of Parliament here may not have been able to vote in that 2000 referendum, it paved the way so that today they can speak on behalf of the electorate. One SXM urges each member of Parliament present to use that opportunity afforded them in the 2000 referendum to answer the following questions. Why has it been so long since we consulted the people? And is it not time to consult them again? How long does Parliament need to initiate this law? What are the current impediments? What do you commit to doing to solve those impediments? Will you commit to a referendum to consult the people on their future? We also humbly suggest that if these questions are too difficult to answer here today, then maybe the question each and every member of Parliament should answer in all honesty is this: are you satisfied with the present constitutional status? During our last presentation, I cited J.D. Krull from a passage in the 1863 Emancipation Declaration, saying that just as it was wrong for Krull to declare that emancipation was a benefit to be granted to the enslaved people, which they had to be worthy of, so too is it incorrect to view independence as something that people are to show their worthiness for. Today, One SXM stands by this position, that independence is not a privilege. It is an inalienable right of all colonized people recognized by the United Nations. 5 months ago on July 1st, our people observed Emancipation Day, an event marked by the usual pomp and circumstance. But what did it really mean to the members of parliament, the people's representatives? Do the members of parliament recall that when Emancipation Declaration was issued, those who actually benefited from the measure of emancipation were the enslavers, who were compensated handsomely for the so-called loss of their properties, our enslaved ancestors. Yet, to this date, our people have not received justice from this crime against humanity. To add insult to injury, the Kingdom government has recently announced that it will be sending a representative to our island to apologize for the so-called slavery past, which it is claimed will not be accompanied by any discussions of reparations. For the record, Mr. Chairman, One SXM is not against an apology. In fact, on September 6th this year, we called for an unreserved, official, and legal apology for the Netherlands' involvement in slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. This, we believe, must follow the Dutch government's acknowledgement of slavery as a crime against humanity, as it is acknowledged internationally. What we are against is the process and the conditions of the apology to be issued on December 19th, as intended by the Dutch state, because, as far as we can tell, it lacks all the variables of a valid, sincere national apology. The mere fact that it comes with condition attached is already an indication of where we are heading. Mr. Chairman, the world movement for reparatory justice stems from the injustice of this crime against humanity. The One SXM Association has decided to join the regional body, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, established to seek reparatory justice as a duty, not just to us and our ancestors, but also to future generations of St. Martiners. CARICOM has outlined a 10-point plan that could be used as a framework in the process. Based on this framework, the path to justice for the descendants is as follows: a sincere, formal apology by the governments of Europe, a repatriation program to resettle persons who wish to return to Africa, Indigenous Peoples Development Program to rehabilitate indigenous populations, cultural institutions set up to expose the experiences of the descendants of the victims of the crimes against humanity, European countries taking responsibility to alleviate the health disaster created as a consequence of slavery, an illiteracy eradication program to advance economic development, an African knowledge program for community rehabilitation, psychological rehabilitation for the historical and lingering traumas, technology transfer and science sharing for development, and finally, point number 10, debt cancellation. In our open letter to the Council of Ministers and to Parliament, we have proposed that Parliament start the process with a series of debates on the issues related to the evil system of slavery and its nefarious effects on modern-day society, and that government establish a Slavery and Reparations Commission to come up with a well-researched position and plan for government to adopt. We share the perspective of Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, who says that reparations will be the greatest political movement of this century. Reparatory justice is about pursuing social justice and growth while achieving economic growth for our countries in the region. In the words of Beckles, reparation is not about standing on the street corners asking for handouts. The reparations movement is the movement that will save humanity and the world. Let it be clear, reparations is not just about a check. Like emancipation, reparatory justice is a process, not an event. It is about adding value to the bodies lost and dignity to the lives of the people of this beautiful nation that we are still forging, and to be inherited by future generations. As a people living in a non-independent territory and descendants of people who fought for our emancipation, we feel it is our duty to persist in our fundamental right to self-determination, and to do so by constantly checking the pulse of the people until we attain it. We would appreciate if Parliament could indicate its opinion on our proposed resolution and the way forward in convening the referendum. In closing, I'd like again to leave you and the people of St. Martin with the words of Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister of Ghana. And these are his words: "The best way of learning to be an independent sovereign state is to be an independent sovereign state." You see, Mr. Chairman, independence for us is a pro-St. Martin mission, and we believe the sooner we prepare to make that transition, the better our future generations of St. Martiners will be. The move to independence is innate as well as it is universal, and cannot be hijacked by any particular group, as it is an exercise that must involve the entire community. However, that journey must start with a consultative referendum in which the people are given the opportunity to freely decide if that is what they want for their future and the future of their children and grandchildren. And all we are asking our Parliament to do is to consult the people without further delay. On the matter of the impending Dutch apology, we urge Parliament to convene an extraordinary meeting, set aside political differences, and pass a motion that can be unanimously supported to instruct government to reject the impending apology on behalf of the people of St. Martin. Let's all work for Team St. Martin to do this right, because we only have one opportunity to do so, given the fact that December 19th is but 6 days away. We have started a petition drive, and we are asking all of St. Martin, young and old, regardless of ethnic or heritage background, to sign it. And we are humbly asking and suggesting that each member of Parliament take a copy of the One SXM petition to their constituents and ask them to sign it. I thank you for your attention.
Dr. Arundel, that's it? Okay. Dr. Arundel, thank you for your presentation. Just for clarity, I saw that some of the parts, I can understand that it did tie into independence, or sort of a justification for a referendum, but we still also will go into agenda point 2 further into your discussion on reparations.
Sorry,
Yes.
what I tried to do in bringing up the discussion about reparations, I have with me the copy of the CARICOM 10-point agenda that we were suggesting, because when we listen to the conversations taking place out in the public domain, there seems to be a misunderstanding either of our position or what reparatory justice is. And so what we want to clarify is that we are talking about reparatory justice. Reparation in terms of financial compensation as is required in any official state apology is but one component of it. But we are talking about restoring damage that was done in areas of healthcare, in areas of disconnection from who you are as a people, heritage, etc. And we're asking for the ability to start on the right foot as a people that have been wronged by slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, and colonialism.
Okay, thank you for that elucidation. Based on that, indeed, then, I think we will continue with the agenda points being separate so that we can go in great detail into what you just mentioned in agenda point 2 regarding reparatory justice. So at this point, members of Parliament, we are on the topic of an update regarding the resolution. You heard the resolution read, and as well, as I mentioned earlier, the resolution is available to members of Parliament IS 620 of 2021-2022. Members of Parliament, if you wish to pose any questions or participate in the discussion, please indicate. And to whom can I give the floor? Okay, yeah. MP, which one first? MP Bijlani. MP Bijlani, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to the Grafir. And good afternoon to Dr. Rhoda Arundel and Mr. Loons and colleagues Lawrence and my colleagues here in Parliament. When you were showing the thing on the screen, I just read one point. Question can be yay or nay, yes or no, independence. So what about people who are not completely sold on? So you want to just direct them to say no, or you want to give a little option in there? Okay, not now, but 5 years down the lane might be if we are ready. Because when I ask a lot of people, a lot of answers come like that. So indirectly, we are just forcing them to say no. I would not take that. I would like to captive those audience for at least knowing that, okay, there are many people who are looking for it, but not today, but might be 5 years down the lane when they say, okay, if we see the country really prepared for this, let's go for that independence. That's just my observation, and thank you.
Thank you, MP Bijlani. Next we have, I'll allow the questions to come in on this agenda point. That way, in the meantime, you can also prepare the answers. Next we'll have MP Pantaflet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the chair, my colleagues, the committee in Parliament, of course, Dr. Rhoda Arundel and Mr. Alson Lawrence, persons that are viewing, those that are listening, and those sitting in the tribune. Mr. Chairman, today I want to thank Dr. Rhoda Arundel for the presentation. Interesting enough, I think 20 years indeed is a long time. If you look at 1994 and 2000, which was a span of just 6 years. One of the things I believe that and just to tap in a bit into what my colleague MP Bijlani said, is the issue of the readiness of the people. And I believe the issue of the readiness of the people depends on us as members of Parliament, government, and so on, because the fact is, first and foremost for me, has always been a matter of stability. Stability is key, because if you're not stable, what are you going to tell the people? What confidence are you giving them that you're able to be a responsible leader in an independent country? I think we are late, definitely. We should have already started the issue of independence by our very behavior. I've said it already on the floor of this Parliament, Mr. Chairman, and also as a member of the Island Council, that we should have already behaved as an independent country. The mentality or our thinking process should have already started, and this should have just been a follow-up. Now, I think to wait another 5 years or 10 years or whatever, I think that we should start immediately to get a position as to where our populations are today, our population is today. That's key. The dissemination of information to the public. Because if that does not happen, then, as my colleague MP Bijlani said, people will, at the spur of the moment, might say no because of what is taking place now. So I think it's important that we ensure that the public is informed as to what it is that's taking place, and make sure that they feel that they're part of the decision-making process and not us as Parliament, Government, Senate deciding for them. I think that is key. There's a lot more I can say, Mr. Chairman, but I'll leave it at this for now, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Pantaflet. Next, we have MP Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to my colleagues. Good afternoon to the people tuned in. And a good afternoon to Dr. Arundel and Mr. Lawrence of One SXM. Thank you to the representative of One SXM for their presentation, but also their continuous action and dedication to this movement. Mr. Chairman, you know, I just wanted to remind everyone that this committee was established 2 years ago as a direct response to what we deemed as neo-colonialistic behavior by the Dutch government. So this was Parliament resisting behavior that we believed was not warranted. And what we did was put in place a number of follow-up, a motion created with a number of follow-up actions, which included very controversial things. A UN petition. We had counter proposals to COHO. We hosted our first roundtable discussion on the Kingdom Charter, which is seen as one of the main tools, right? And where democratic deficits exist in the kingdom. So this parliament has done a number of things, but we have also not done some things, including, let's say, following up on this consultative referendum, or at least deciding that if it is something that we will do, to at least put a work group in place to get it done. We've also not officially had a discussion on slavery and the apology that is pending, and I think that is also important. So I agree definitely with Dr. Arundel as well. And for me personally, in 2000, I was in college. I went to college. I was in the United States. So I am one of those who are now in a generation of St. Martiners. That should be heard. I should actually ask myself the question. And I believe that the rest of the country needs to ask themselves the question, how do you feel as a citizen in this kingdom? And how do you think we should move forward? And so, Mr. Chairman, I would like to propose that a petite committee be established to create what I believe is a roadmap if the members of parliament do agree that we should have a consultative referendum on this specific issue. I propose that a petite committee be put in place to create that roadmap to present to the Central Committee members so that we can move forward. We are 12 years since the reconfiguration of this kingdom. We are also living in a very historic time, and so we need to act, definitely. I know that many of us are waiting for government indeed to establish a work group, a proper work group, but as Parliament, we have a responsibility as well. And so I'd like to make that proposal, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that I can get the support of my fellow members of Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duncan. MP Heilige Martin, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to Dr. Dr. Rhoda Arundel. I got you. And Alston Lawrence, welcome. And good afternoon to those listening and viewing, and good afternoon to my fellow colleagues. To answer your question, Dr. Arundel, no, I'm not satisfied with the statute, with the Kingdom Charter. I mentioned that a couple weeks ago, a couple days ago, that it's just a dysfunctional kingdom. We're in a dysfunctional relationship, and it's time for us to revisit. Either we amend it and bring it up to par with international laws, or we terminate it. And it's something we would have to, of course, discuss internally. And terminating it, like I stated before, can mean many things. It could mean terminating it, going independent, terminating it, and maybe becoming a gemeente. It's something that we would have to sit jointly, and I support the suggestion by MP Duncan for us to create a petite comité and discuss that, because there's so much happening right now in the kingdom, so much. We have now acknowledgement of the decolonization, that it has not been finalized, finally. We have now reparations, we're seeking reparations as we speak. We have now an apology, which is still up in the air, still not clear. We haven't heard from the government as yet what their plans are, where they stand with this 6 days from now. We haven't heard anything. And we also still have a potential consensus law looming. It's all over the place. We're going in many different directions, and I believe this committee, if we could sit together as a parliament and hopefully bring in government, we can sit together and maybe set a date. And to answer MP Bijlani's question, setting a date for referendum, and if, let's say it's yes or no, and one day they say, on that day they say it's yes, it will take us years to become independent. We have to remember that. We need to start somewhere. It will take us years to get there. So a yes or no is enough. We want to put it out, no problem. I remember Dr. Arundel stating once she wanted it to be the same time with elections or not. I think those were the two options. And I'd like for her to break that down for us. Why? And I think that was mainly she was a proponent of that. If Dr. Arundel, through you, Mr. Chair, can explain to me why have a referendum the same day as election? That's my only question, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give my support to the proposal by MP Duncan. And like I said, there's a lot happening in the kingdom. We need to set one script, stick to it, and maybe set a date for referendum and hear what the people have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Heilige Martin. Are there any other MPs? Before I go to MP George, just want to make sure there's no other who didn't speak already. No? Okay, so MP George Pantoflet, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just want to add a quote because, as I said, is yes, government, parliament have to do the lead and so on. But important again is people themselves and their mindset as to where they are. And why do I say this? I have to read a quote from the late Dr. Amos Wilson. And he says this: you cannot consume yourself into equality. You must produce yourself into equality. You move into equality and beyond by productive thinking. So, Mr. Chairman, it depends a lot also on us as a people as to how we want to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, MP George Pantoflet. If there are no other members asking for the floor at this time, members of Parliament, members of this committee, we have heard from the One SXM Association, and of course, I'm sure everyone appreciates, let's say, the sort of sentiment that is, relayed to the organization and to the public by extension. However, I heard some very specific questions that were posed, and actually one central question that was posed by Dr. Arundel, and I think it would behoove us to really get to the question of what this association is asking the members of Parliament and the factions within Parliament, which you have them here on the screen. I don't think we need to do a quiz, but in general, maybe Dr. Arundel, you can elucidate in general, what would the One SXM Association want to hear from the members of this committee? If I understand you correctly, it is, are we in support of a referendum being called to put, a consultative referendum being called to put to the people of St. Martin whether they are for or yes or no independence? Maybe I could just give you the floor one more time to reiterate that point, and then maybe if the members of Parliament are okay with that, we can maybe get a bit of a more direct response to her query. Dr. Arundel?
Do we answer the question then, right? How does that work?
Actually, yes. So you answer the question. That's really my question to you. So you can answer all the questions, and then you can come to mine at the end.
Okay, let me come to yours at the end. And my colleague would also, okay. First, let me address the question, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Bijlani, MP Bijlani. And I'm going to choose my words carefully here, because I've never, in any presentation that I have made, or in any presentation that I have heard either in the Independence for St. Martin Foundation, when it was SMECO, now One SXM, I've never heard anybody say, let's ask the people to go independent tomorrow. Never. So I'm always intrigued when people bring that up, because then it tells me where's that person's head at that time as opposed to mine. Well, what I did say in my presentation is that we are here today as a result of a referendum that was called in 2000, and we got the status in 2010. I've been always saying this. For us in One SXM and Independence Fund, we see it as a more or less 10-year trajectory, that it would take at least that long, but you gotta first figure out where your destination is first before you start to plan for it. You don't plan for somewhere you don't know where you're going to. It just makes common sense to ask for the thing and then work out the details of which vehicle will get you there best, right? So I think that's an interesting question, but I hear it a lot, and so it's not just to MP Bijlani, but to so many people that keep throwing that in as a part of our discussion when it's not something that we ever bring up. Never, ever. And so getting to the next part of the question in terms of readiness, that's another one I find very interesting. So when I hear that, what happens to my system, it says, okay, give me your list. And I will compare your list with my list of what you think we should have. And we will check it off to see when we get to the point of what we call readiness. Because this conversation about readiness is a very vague, elusive type of conversation. It's so vague that it's so easy to repeat, but nobody could tell you concretely what it entails or what it means or what it's supposed to look like. So every time I hear that, I go like, maybe we should start with a shopping list, 3 more central banks, 2 more public meetings, 15 more doctorates with degrees in whatever area, maybe owning, the prosecutor's office. I don't know what the list looks like. But I would like to compare lists of people who think this will make us ready versus where we are today to make the decision to have the referendum, and then compare notes. And then the last point on that, and I will tie that into MP George's statement really, has to do with leaders. Because when I hear conversation about being ready because of the, I get the impression that people think that the people who we now see as leaders will be there forever, which is an interesting thing, because when you ask, I've asked young students recently, like, you know who Claude Watty is? Do you know who Vance James is? They don't even know who Patrick Illich. They don't know. They don't remember them. History will judge you according to your actions today, but a lot of us will disappear from the annals quite quickly. And people won't remember that you were here once as the leader for whatever. So I don't think the people who it may be so, but the people who are physically currently occupying office may be the people that will be around when we become independent. Just food for thought to think about, right? MP Duncan's question was more like a proposal so we agree. I mean, however, right, we agree on that. And then MP Heiliger Martin's question was why on the same day of election? One of the excuses I would use that people often throw in the referendum discourse and independence is cost. You're going to go, so we can organize another one. And we say, okay, one of the practical ways to solve that question of cost would be to put it at the same time of the election. Like in a lot of other places, you have, referendums on key issues. And most countries that are very, democratic always go to their population on very key issues. Some of them in the U.S., it's by states, different state election. It's a key issue during the election. There's a question there one time, you answer it, and so you get the results one time. And I thought that would be a practical approach that we could use in St. Martin to mitigate cost for organizing a referendum.
Good afternoon. Another good reason is also in an election, there's a campaign time already. So people are already used to being fed information as to how to make their choice politically, a member of parliament or whatnot. And it's quite normal in other places. I think the doctor mentioned that in the U.S. as well. You'll be voting on that, and you'll be voting as well on a resolution. So sometimes the politicians then can not only campaign for themselves, but also for the question of referendum at the same time. And that way you get a bigger turnout statistically when that's going on that way.
Okay, and just before I go to MP Bryson's question, which I want to elaborate on the screen, is that question of why yes or no to independence. Oh my goodness, why not? That's number one. But we had option A, and they chose, and that didn't work out. 6 years later, we went to option B. Nobody is suggesting, as far as I can think of, option C. Not with the conversations I see taking place. I'm like, what's next? D was the option. Independence or not? What were we going to cook up something else in between C plus 5 or C.2 or D minus or, it's either you're in or out. And I think if we don't make a resolute decision whether we want to go forward or not, we're going to be in the same situation, neither fish nor fowl, but always complaining. But we can't move forward because we keep doing this thing, which is, neither here nor there. So with all due respect, we stick by the position, yes or no. And I think it's time that we also stop underestimating our people. There are people that all of us speak to. We we even did our own little survey. And you might be surprised, but I'm saying the only way to know for sure is to call the referendum. That's the only way to get a resounding answer as to whether or not people believe that independence is a place to go. We are asking, what's taking so long? How can we, what can we do as One SXM to help Parliament speed up this process? Because we think this is a very important thing, especially in the conversations that are taking place now. We'll get to the reparations conversation just now. But, why is it taking so long? Is this not an important enough question to bring to the people of St. Martin so we can move forward once and for all? And, what can we do, And do the members of Parliament, do they commit to asking the people how they feel about their future? I think that's the more important question. How committed are the members of Parliament to really hearing from the people of St. Martin how they feel about their future and the future of their children? That's it.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Arundel. And before I go back to the members of Parliament to elaborate and why I pose that question is because exactly what you're saying. I think some of us are very direct and understand why you are here and what you are asking of the Parliament. You want to know, okay, why are we taking so long? What's happening? What is the position of Parliament? Okay. In a committee like this, we can't give an official position of the Parliament. A committee setting is indeed where we can have discussions. It would take like a public meeting to say that the Parliament as a whole gives a position. But I would not shy away from the position that I stated before, that I believe that the highest form of democracy that you can offer to a population is a referendum, because it is one of the most humbling things a parliament can do, because you're saying, instead of us taking a decision or us voting or you vote for us so we can increase tax or we can do this or do that, we're saying, no, you the people. If you look at Article 92, it's based on, well, we have this law, but before it's ratified, you the people tell us. Or we have this major social issue, you the people tell us how to handle it. And I think it's important that we keep a sort of consistency on what we're talking about, because what also I think hurts the discussion is that even with the inception of this committee, where we talk decolonization, and you hear, well, you can decolonize by changing the statute, you can decolonize by being a province, you can do all of this, you can also go independent, but which one is it? The One SXM Association, if I understand clearly, is option 4, as we used to call it, correct? Which is now coming to a yes or a no. So I think it would be helpful, and of course I'm not here to dictate how factions or members of Parliament respond to the One SXM Association, but it's more, I'm trying to facilitate that the discussion that you are here for the second time, or maybe even the third time, that the association and the public at large does get a position. I think, and another follow-up question I would ask of you, is it that the association necessarily wants to know the individual stance of the yes or no, or the stance of a referendum yes or no, if you understand what I'm saying? Because like I said, we are pro, or for our faction, we are pro asking the people, highest form of democracy. But do we now have to have a debate to decide for the people as well? Well, we think you should vote yes, or we think you should vote no. Just clarify that point, because I think that also helps the members of Parliament and the public understand what your goal is. Dr. Arundel?
Oh, you kind of warmed my heart there, the last one. But no, we are asking Parliament yes or no. No, we're just asking Parliament table the referendum.
Correct.
And let the people decide yes or no. But while we're at it, because we all, from everything that we've taken note of over the years, it seems like in principle, members of Parliament are pro-independence, in principle. So I'm saying, let's start from there then and figure out how, or debate how, or work out how. But I would hope that members of Parliament will also champion independence in the referendum, to kind of tell the people, listen, we know that this thing is good for us. We can assure you that we are competent leaders to get you there, and and vote for it. That will be my hope, my personal hope, that members of parliament who believe in it, because there are others who say, yeah, I believe in it, but okay, then you work that out later. But those who believe in it, we would hope that they too would want to convince their constituents of the value of voting for independence in a referendum.
Excellent, thank you. With that elucidation, members of parliament, I will then again turn the floor. I see MP Pantiflet, followed by MP Duncan. MP Pantiflet, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Arundel, for the response and explanation. Mr. Chairman, to you, my concern is that the longer we wait, and before I continue, I voted for independence in the referendum of 2000. Let me make that plain. I have not changed my mind either. My concern is that the longer we wait, you see, and sometimes when you're sitting, Mr. Chair, you wonder, do they get it? All kind of laws and proposals and amendments are being, let me use this word, imposed based on kingdom level that will have us so tied into the Dutch kingdom that by the time we become independent, we would not know where we are. So time, Mr. Chairman, is of essence. I asked a question many years ago, 17 years ago to be exact. And I asked it to an economist, and I said it more than once on this floor. I like to repeat myself because sometimes, if you say it more than once, then probably, most will get it. I asked an economist, does St. Martin have enough finances in order to maintain herself? The answer, without a shadow of a doubt, was yes. It only takes management. Chairman, there's a phrase that I just created just a while I listened to Dr. Arundel, and it's like this. We have everything to be independent except independence itself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And in terms of the referendum, you're actually...
Oh, definitely, as I said, of course.
Thank you. We have MP Duncan. You have the floor.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, just to be as pragmatic as possible, first, the members of this committee, at least, you're asking to share their, at least, oh, sorry. No, but I think it is important not only for Parliament, but for the people to say, hey, okay, this committee or a majority of this committee agree that a consultative referendum should take place, yes or no, and if yes, then of course I would attach my proposal for that. We know that referendums can be either binding or non-binding. However, that can come after, I believe, a small committee is put in place if the members are in favor. So I as well would like to know, I am a proponent of asking the people. It actually would be the first of what I hope are many referendums on matters of public interest and importance. So I think that it would be important for us, especially in this historic time, to say we will hold the first consultative referendum for the people on such an important topic and make it happen hopefully within the next year. So I also look forward to my colleagues' opinions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Duncan. And being that I started, you had requested to speak again. I indeed was going to put your proposal to the members of the committee. Rather than me ad-lib your proposal, can you just state it one more time, and then I'll ask if maybe by show of hands or if anyone wants to comment on the proposal, that we can at least have that aspect ironed out. Would you like to state it again, MP Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the assumption that all of the members in this committee, or the majority of members, agree that the issue of independence is of national public interest, that a petite committee be established to create and propose a roadmap towards actually hosting that, or putting in place that referendum with all of the details that come with that. But that petite committee would be responsible for proposing to the central committee a roadmap from now until what could be that referendum. That's a good question.
Petite.
Five members
Okay.
maximum. Oh,
Or three?
two.
We'll
Four?
determine. I guess we'll determine the size after. But let's see if there's interest towards the proposal of MP Duncan. Maybe it can be done by a show of hands would be sufficient. Show of hands for how many people agree with the proposal of MP Duncan to establish a petite committee that would further investigate. I see. Yes, we have a majority of members. MP Westcott Williams, you wanted to comment?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And the proposal is to establish a committee, and could I hear the balance of the work of the committee very specifically?
Sure, no problem. MP Duncan, would you like to elucidate again?
Yes, the main objective of the Petite Committee is to create a roadmap that would give a proposal to the Central Committee on the actions that would need to take place in order to host the consultative referendum.
Okay, so I'll ask one more time then if show of hands, the proposal of MP Duncan, if it has support. I see, yes, it has majority support within the committee to continue with that proposal. I will have to consult with the Griffier. We'll go over to we'll continue the discussion. In the meantime, I'll consult with the Griffier to see what the next steps would be to select the committee, etc. MP George Pantoflet.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that once the committee has been established, I believe that's where it can determine exactly what kind of structure will be used in order to go forward. I was just saying, Mr. Chairman, that once the committee has been established, it's basically among the members themselves, it will be discussed exactly what structure will be used in order to achieve the particular goal that we're looking after. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you for that, MP Pantoflet. MP Westcott Williams.
Mr. Chairman, thank you again. When a committee is being proposed, this is the committee for the CCAD. So is it from within the CCAD, some members are going to be selected, and how exactly would that work? Or is it a separate committee that is going to be, or are particular members going to be assigned work to be done?
Yeah, indeed. I would envision it, and it would be, of course, for the committee to see if they agree. The way I envision it is actually similar to what was done before, where a selection of members from this committee were put together to help organize or propose. This is a panel discussion and so on. So similarly, we would have a selection of a group of people that would then come together to help create the roadmap, bring it to the CCAD committee, then to Central Committee, etc. So it's a petite committee. Let's call it a task force for another term if necessary. Work group might be another term. Does that answer your question? And do members agree with my description of the work group? Yeah, petite committee. Okay. The size of this work group?
No, continue.
5?
I think 5 is good. You need an uneven
5?
number.
Okay. Can I get members that would like to be a part from the 5? 1, 2, oh boy, we got a lot already.
Put
we're gonna
who
do
wants to do it then.
Why doesn't
MP Westcott
then,
Williams?
oh, sorry.
Yeah, MP Westcott
I
Williams.
figured we were behind closed doors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why doesn't the committee, now outside of all that we're doing and kind of the hearing and getting proposals and getting questions posed directly to members of the faction, why doesn't the committee establish now specifically the points that we're going to research, so that you don't need a committee from within this committee, but this committee now is going to get to what the proposal is for the to come with a roadmap or whatever have you, because you can't exclude members from exactly. Let the committee now put down the points for this committee now to go deliberate amongst itself on and come with proposals.
Okay, a couple points on this. I think we're kind of in the right direction, but we do have the One SXM Association here. This is more, let's say, something for an internal handling by the committee itself. What I would propose, we at least have an intention to research this further. That has been established and that is clear. Perhaps maybe right after we can have a discussion and flesh out exactly the details at agenda point 2 after agenda. Yes. Yeah, but then I'll have to adjourn this agenda point then. So what I will do is adjourn this agenda point so that we can continue that discussion. Maybe that way we can move forward to the next agenda point, unless any other members regarding this current agenda point, which is the submitted resolution of One SXM Association. Are there any questions in that regard? Any further? No. I did have one other thing. No, I'll leave that for the next agenda point. So, Dr. Arundel, before we adjourn this agenda point, as you heard, there is at least an intention from what we see here to have us be able to flesh out all the details that would actually, I think, to answer your question, MP Westcott, these are some of the things we probably have to answer or establish. But I will adjourn this agenda point so that the committee itself can sit down and discuss this further and come to a clear understanding on how we will proceed. So this point will be adjourned. Is there any other on this point at this time?
No, we just look forward to what comes out. Don't make it too long.
That is, Dr. Arundel, that is honestly also a bit of my concern.
Yeah.
Because, anyway, I'll leave that.
Yeah, because it was
I'll leave that
March.
to
Yeah,
myself
it's
at
almost a year since we were here last.
MP Grisha Heliga
Mr.
Martin.
Chairman, I'm a bit, so you're going to adjourn this agenda point, you're not going to close it, so we're going to reopen it in an open public setting to have a discussion about it? That's why we are adjourning it?
At the very least, if we have to have a discussion behind closed doors, we should decide finally with this point saying this is what we have decided. Because we've started the discussion publicly, even if it's just
Understood.
to reopen this meeting and say, look, we've had the discussion, this is what we've come up with, and it's sort of ratified within the committee in this agenda point. Yes, and a decision has to be taken by the committee as well. So that's why I would
Correct.
adjourn this agenda point. We can, of course, have the rest of the discussion behind closed doors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so with that, we adjourn this agenda and move over to the next agenda point. Okay, we have some, so we've seen the presentation. I don't know if is there an additional or a continuation of the presentation? So there will be a continuation of the presentation that will now more focus on the reparatory justice as was requested by the One SXM Association. So I'll once again give the floor to Dr. Arundel and as well as Mr. Lawrence for their presentation. Dr. Arundel, you have the floor.
Okay, Mr. Lawrence will start off and I'll
Yep.
end.
Mr. Lawrence?
Good afternoon, members of Parliament. We just wanted to really put this into this agenda point about reparatory justice. As mentioned before, the One SXM Organization Association has put itself right up with and in contact with and soon to join the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Okay, the CARICOM Reparations Commission was put together by CARICOM basically to start to work on this sort of stuff. It asserts that European governments were owners and traders of enslaved Africans, that European governments instructed genocidal actions upon indigenous communities, and it asserts that European governments created the legal, financial, and fiscal policies necessary for the enslavement of Africans. Because of our geo-location, all of CARICOM has put together their own views on reparatory justice, and these are the 10 points here. The 10 points again. Oh, yeah. Sorry. The Reparations Commission is committed to the process of national, international reconciliation internationally. Victims and their descendants have a duty to call for reparatory justice. Their call for justice is the basis of the closure they seek to the terrible tragedies that engulfed humanity during modernity. Sorry. The CRC comes into being some 2 generations after the national independence process and finds European colonial rule as a persistent part of Caribbean life. The Caribbean Reparations Committee operates within the context of persistent objection from European governments to its mandate. Nonetheless, it is optimistic that CARICOM Reparatory Justice Program will gain acceptance as a necessary path to progress. The Reparations Committee sees the persistent racial victimization of the descendants of slavery and genocide as the root cause of their suffering today. The CRC recognizes that the persistent harm and suffering experienced today by these victims as the primary cause of development failure in the Caribbean. It calls upon European governments to participate in this reparatory justice program with a view to prepare these victims and sufferers for full admission with dignity into the citizenry of the global community. The reparations committee here outlines the path to reconciliation, truth, and justice for victims and their descendants. You want to go into part one? Dr. Rhoda Arundel will get into the first point.
Okay.
Dr. Arundel? go
Yeah,
ahead.
so on the issue of reparatory justice, as we outlined, and we will keep reiterating, the whole idea of reparatory justice is really to seek justice for the wrongdoings, number one, but also for development of people where we are today, but and for safeguarding the future for generations to come. So in that context, as we've mentioned, we've been in talks with CARICOM for at least some years now, and we have filed the official request to be a member of the CRC platform because we believe that we owe it to our ancestors to seek justice. And so we will have again on SOS Radio this Saturday another panel discussion on the topic, but involving members of the Caribbean Reparations Commission as well, who will give a more formal position where CARICOM stands. And this is important because we believe, especially in the context of the apology that is impending, that based on the tenets of a valid national apology, which have to do with things like reckoning, naming, regret, responsibility, expression of remorse, non-repetition, repudiation, further action, and including compensation, monetary compensation. We're not hearing that, and we believe that in the interest of true reparatory justice for the people of St. Martin, whether it's the past, the present, or the future, that Parliament cannot allow, does not have, I believe, the luxury to permit government, frankly speaking, to accept this impending apology that's coming with conditions. Because an apology that comes with conditions, an apology that says upfront, no discussion of reparations, in our book is not a valid, it's not a sincere apology, and we should not entertain it. And I believe such an apology could also go against literally what we are doing in terms of reparatory justice in the future with all the work that is being done at the CARICOM level. It's like you're in a class action lawsuit. You know what you're entitled to. You know if you hold on a little longer, you will get what you are entitled to. But maybe because a couple of millions are thrown at you, you decide to leave the class action lawsuit and go after the million or two when you know you're entitled to billions. So in terms of true reparatory justice, we want to urge Parliament to please convene an urgent meeting, ask or instruct, because at this stage, literally instruct the government to hold off on accepting this impending apology on behalf of the people of St. Martin, certainly not on behalf of my ancestors, so that the St. Martin people, past, present, and future, can really get the reparatory justice that we deserve, and we know that we deserve. If you would please, I don't know how you do it in-house, but please get to that point where we say this is for Team St. Martin, this is in the interest of St. Martin people, and wait for true reparatory justice. And again, I'll go back, that impending apology, we don't get to do this over. It's not just going to be like, oh, we said sorry last time, and now we're coming back to say sorry again. We don't get to do this over. So in the interest of true reparatory justice, we're asking, we're urging, we're beseeching Parliament, please instruct the government of St. Martin to reject the impending apology on December 19th.
That's it? Okay, thank you very much for that presentation on Agenda Point 2 regarding reparatory justice. Members of Parliament, yes, Mr. Lawrence.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would like to also point out that this CARICOM 10-point plan was also quoted by the Prime Minister was it last week? Last week was also quoted by the Prime Minister. Since then, One SXM has been on radio shows in different countries. The entire region is paying attention. Not just this committee at CARICOM, but the organizations in the different countries, including Barbados and in different areas, are paying attention to how this goes down in the Dutch Caribbean. So on top of that, we have started a petition. I think we mentioned it already. The petition we have hand-signed documents. We have digital as well. And we have people from all over the world actually signing this petition. People from in the Netherlands, Suriname. And the only reason I added this is because there is a lot of news about this apology all over the kingdom and outside of the kingdom. And I would also ask Parliament to Google that and really look at what people are saying. It seems that so far it has been an up-down approach and even secretive. And so right now you can see that the descendants of those people, the enslaved Africans of the slave trade, really right now are feeling the emotional side of it and are understanding, no, I can't, as Dr. Arundel just said, I can't accept a half apology on behalf of my ancestors and what they've been through. I know several members of Parliament have also contacted us and have expressed the same. And we just ask for some sort of intervening, because on the government side, it's not really, nobody's getting any information. And it's quite important that that message gets over there if Parliament feels that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Arundel, anything else for now?
No, thank you.
Okay. Members of the committee, I again turn the floor. Who's next? And the next speaker is MP Heilige Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, regarding the apology, I have a few questions. Prior to that, prior to this becoming public, I was informed that One St. Martin had a meeting with Van Huffelen, a private meeting. It wasn't publicized. I don't know if One St. Martin can share with us what the outcome of that meeting was and why that meeting and why was it not made public? What was the main purpose of that meeting, and was the government aware of it? And if the government was aware of it, what was their feedback from that meeting? Have they called you in, sat with you to discuss the matter of this apology? So I would like to know some information on that, if it's possible to maybe share with the audience, share with the people. And lastly, I'd like to get the opinion of Dr. Arundel regarding the apology. According to the Suriname reps, they're saying that the apology should not come from the Prime Minister Rutte, that it should come from the King. What are your thoughts on that? Also, I haven't heard you mention anything around that. What are your thoughts on that? Who should the apology come from? Should it come from Rutte? They're saying no, it should not come from Rutte because government's cabinets change. So if it comes from the crown, then it's solidified. So what's your opinion on that? So mainly those two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Heilige Martin. Next, MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman, thanks to Mr. Lawrence and Dr. Arundel for their presentation and their sharing of information with Parliament as to the actions undertaken by the association, or I believe you are an association, right? And for sharing the information. Mr. Chairman, the matter of the reparation / apology or the separation thereof. Mr. Chairman, after many attempts, discussions, demands, etc., and I'm talking years that this have been going on, and pressured not only by steps taken by specific cities in the Netherlands, this issue of an apology on the same date of December 19th in all of the territories plus Suriname by the representatives of the Dutch government will take place. Mr. Chairman, before that, the Dutch government commissioned a study, a dialogue, if you wish, to be done, which resulted in a report with recommendations to the Dutch government that includes apologies, no, that includes acknowledgement, apology, and I couldn't think of a better name than a recompense, because it's not really reparation or such, but it sketches the report, which, by the way, the government of St. Martin also sent to Parliament, but sort of hidden in other documentation in response to questions by Parliament. Nevertheless, so this report speaks of financial, making it good kind of finances that should be made available. So that report, and based on that report, when the Dutch government received it, they then decided in the Dutch Council of Ministers that they are going to do their own fact-finding to determine whether some of the observations made in the report were actually true. So, just like they are proposing for the apology, different Dutch politicians visited the island, including State Secretary Van Huffelen visiting St. Martin. The Parliament not being informed of what is taking place, at least this member of Parliament, unaware of in what context all of this is taking place, sees articles in which government and others are having a manifestation to the State Secretary, who actually came on a fact-finding based on the report that was before the Dutch government. So subsequently, we learned from public statements by the Prime Minister of St. Martin that that should not be considered any kind of formal reaction to that report and to the Dutch government. Because, as the Prime Minister indicated in a public statement, the participation of St. Martin in that dialogue group was basically non-existent. And if it was not formal. Fact remains, the report has been made, the report is making some recommendations. Then the government decides that they are going to be making a plan, and they need their time to make this plan. Oh, by the way, they decided, while at it, why don't we throw in the fact that the apology cannot be made while the 12.5% cut is on the table. So I'm like, okay, so if tomorrow State Secretary Van Huffelen decides they shouldn't be there, which is not her purview, by the way, then the apology is acceptable? Or will the discussions about the apology only start following a removal of the 12.5%? Well, Mr. Chairman, let it be stated here that the ones to remove the 12.5% salary cuts or cuts in salary benefits from public servants and semi-public workers is in the hands of the government of St. Martin. This Parliament, in those two laws especially, established that the ones to annul those laws is the government. So, two things. Question is, will the government remove these laws, so annul these laws, and then engage in discussions on the apology? Or has the government already taken a stand, like others have, on this apology? Okay, so that would be the question. I have no idea how they are approaching it. The only thing that I know for sure is that the government says, yeah, the apology can come while these laws are on the book. So as long as the laws are on the book, the apology will not come. Then, Mr. Chairman, the matter of, it's interesting to hear from One St. Martin Association, their not only endeavors, because apparently they're getting somewhere with these endeavors to join the CARICOM Commission. Is the association aware of any attempts by the government to be part of this regional trajectory? So in your discussions with the representatives of the commission, does the government, have you picked up anywhere where the St. Martin government is on that trajectory? Yes or no? How exactly is the formation of that commission that, for example, you can have associations and organizations join the phrase, not a good word, but join the movement, let me use that word. And so it is interesting, and I think that is one of our weaknesses in all that is taking place, and where we should be able to hold up a fist is we are actually all over the place on the topic of the constitutional/political future of this country, which right now is in the Dutch kingdom, which right now we have to deal with the issue that they're saying, yeah, we're going to apologize for the slave trade and the slavery history of the Dutch kingdom. What it's going to mean, I don't know. Clearly, especially from non-governmental organizations in the different countries, including Suriname, but also Curacao, the reaction has been, you are not going to determine for me when, that's an important aspect, when that apology is going to come. And secondly, who are you sending? Who are you sending? Question has been raised. Can you send one of us to give an apology on your behalf? All of these things are playing. So at the end of the day, I don't know what is going to happen. Prime Minister Rutte said he's going to make an apology. He's going to go ahead with this apology on the 19th. What it's going to mean for the intentions to do this in all of the countries, and what does acceptance or not mean? Do we get a chance beforehand to say, if they're coming, don't come because it's not acceptable? Or is this just a free apology that you make? You come, you travel, you come here, you say what you got to say, and you're gone again. And who like it, and who doesn't. So I don't know. I don't know what discussions are taking place with the government of St. Martin where this is concerned, but we can't be saying one thing out of one side of our mouths and another thing out of the other side. On the 7th of December in The Hague, when State Secretary Van Huffelen, who opened a Congress that several of my colleagues and I attended, mention was made of the fact that on the 8th of December, a discussion would have taken place as to how to deal with this upcoming apology. And with the representatives, mind you, of the different islands. And my first question was, but before I could have asked the question, I realized that the Minister Plenipotentiary of St. Martin also asked a question, because on the 8th of December, that discussion was going to take place in the presence of the Minister Plenipotentiary of St. Martin. And the point of the Minister Plenipotentiary was to make sure that everybody understood that discussion only started then and it was to continue. Just to strengthen my point that, so who is speaking on behalf of whom, where? Next thing we're going to see Minister Plenipotentiary and whichever one come in to give apologies on St. Martin here on St. Martin. So we need to be sure of what it is that we want to communicate to whom and when. So, but all of that to say, so do you get when we talk now back to the topic of reparations, is the government of St. Martin, have you met them anywhere on your trajectory to be involved in the regional movement for a reparation? Or is it something that they're sitting back and saying, well, let the private organizations deal with that for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And before going to the next speaker, I'd like to take a 5-minute adjournment. Good afternoon once again, members of the Committee for Constitutional Affairs and Decolonization. We've had a presentation, or two presentations actually, from the One SXM Association, who is here with us in Parliament, and we're now at the second agenda point with the presentation regarding reparatory justice. We received a few questions and comments from some MPs, and we continue to the next Member of Parliament, which is MP George Pantaflet. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon once again. Mr. Chairman, very, very important and very interesting subject. Mr. Chairman, it was about, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago, the word apology and the matter of the Dutch apologizing to the kingdom country, let me use this term. And as I said, a lot of discussions took place in the different islands, and of course, Suriname also. The only thing I'm trying to grasp, Mr. Chairman, is the issue of what is involved in the apology. Is there a document where they say they're going to apologize for this, because the fact is, and I'm being a bit of a devil's advocate here, if you say no to the apology without hearing the apology, or if you say no and come and bring your apology because you don't know what it's all about, that definitely has to be taken into consideration. What does the apology consist of? Mr. Chairman, I started an article, and sometimes if I look at my computer, the articles I started, and then I just put it aside, and then when I hear discussion, I said, why didn't you send it out in advance? And it had to do with one entitled, No to the Apology If There's No Money. That was the heading, No to the Apology If There's No Money. But then I said, but what does the apology entail? Because, Mr. Chairman, the issue of reparations definitely is one that has to happen, or as one of my colleagues said, recompense has to take place, because you just can't apologize and there's nothing. I mean, what's the substance of it? Because there has to be something tied into that benefits those of us who have survived our ancestors. And Mr. Chairman, knowing that reparations is something that's going to take a while, because definitely the CARICOM 10-point plan is something that is being worked on. But I am looking, Mr. Chairman, at the low-hanging fruits, which is in my estimation, not only the 12.5%, because that is an issue where they're telling us, yes, we can cut back XYZ once we have the available funds in the budget itself. And of course, that's where I will continue to hammer on the matter of debt cancellation, which I understood now I'm hearing is being mentioned by even organizations in the Netherlands. And as a matter of fact, even Aruba, they're talking about debt cancellation. Now, I consider, Mr. Chairman, a low-hanging fruit. And something I want to make plain, because sometimes you could confuse the issues. And let me say this, I listened to the One SXM Association presentation, I believe it was Saturday before last, and quite informative. And of course, it is important to get information in order to make the right decision. The 200 million euros that have been, will be put aside, I want the public to know, because it's been said before, to remind the public, it has nothing to do with reparations. That is their money to do whatever marketing plan and so on, Mr. Chairman. Hey, that's for them. That has nothing to do with reparations. And I want us to understand who we are dealing with, Mr. Chairman. We have to be very, very careful. The matter of them coming with an apology, what do we have in place? And I heard that we should definitely prepare ourselves. What do we have in place to say, this is what we want out of that apology? And as I said before, it's going to take some time, but there are certain things that can be done right now. The issue of the 12.5% and the debt cancellation, because right now we have what you call the work group, the TWO, you call them in Dutch, Tijdelijke Werkgroep, who are busy working with civil servants here in order to execute the country packages. Now, important is, Mr. Chairman, a lot of those packages that are being worked on have financial consequences. And they can start by right now paying for those financial consequences, because, Mr. Chairman, definitely we don't have the money available to do so. That's why we are losing civil servants also and so on, because why? They're finding that based on the present situation, the monies that are being paid compared to what they could have been paid rightfully had not the 12.5% been instituted, would have been different. So, Mr. Chairman, I am being very careful and cautious, because the fact is, what are the other countries saying? Aruba, Curacao, and of course, Suriname. We often say, well, let them do their own thing. Let us work together. Yes, things happen differently, maybe in Aruba compared to Curacao and St. Martin, but let us form one fist with regards to the issue of what it is we want for ourselves to be placed in that apology. Now, this might sound a little strange and so on, but I cannot determine for someone when they should apologize. I cannot set a date for when someone should apologize to me. That's up to the individual. All I can do is when that apology comes, I either accept it or reject it. But then the point for us now is what, and for me I'm saying this, what does the apology entail? Because, I want to say no, and we cannot, we can say no, we don't know what it's all about, don't come, because we have no clue what's in that apology. So, for me, I would say it's almost within a rock and a hard place, but the decision should be taken as to the standpoint, and I agree. Who are they coming to apologize to? Government, parliament, the people. Where is this going to take place? That's key. And the king, definitely, I believe, should be the one responsible to do so when that happens. I made a statement on a radio station last Friday, and maybe my colleagues can correct me or inform me. I think an article appeared in a daily newspaper that the king was supposed to come to St. Martin sometime in January. I don't know if I'm correct. February. Come to St. Martin. Now, I normally know that when the king comes sometime, meets with Parliament, we stand in a line, we shake hands and so on, if I'm correct. So, my issue is, if that's the case, if you're going to come, the apology, whatever it is, got to be good, because I'm not going to shake your hand. I'm not going to shake your hand. You cannot tell me that you have benefited from slavery, and then you don't want to accept the fact that that's the case. You see, you have nothing to do with it. No, Mr. Chairman. And then to put some 3 years study, I don't even need 3 years. I just got to Google and tell you exactly how the Dutch economy back in the 60s, how they benefit from slavery. They're there. So, Mr. Chairman, I think it's important, and I will end the way I started. What does the apology entail? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Pantaflet. Are there any others? Yes, MP Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, reparatory justice is about dismantling the legacies of colonialism. Again, this committee is about debating the legacies of colonialism. Reparatory justice could manifest itself in a number of different ways. Me personally, I believe in development funding, whether that can go to education, to the alleviation of poverty, to climate change. There are so many issues that we have that are legacies of colonialism that can be solved, or that can begin to be solved through reparatory justice. So I believe that it is necessary. I understand MP Pantoflet's perspective on the apology, the timing of it. I subscribe to the idea that perhaps regret can be shown now. But how special do we want next year's Emancipation Day to be? When we think about the commemoration of the emancipation of our ancestors, do we want an official apology, as stated by Dr. Arundel, that comes with an approach to recovery, or on recovery and repair? We have to talk healing. Should we say, okay, next year then we want an official apology with a plan of approach? Especially when plans of approach are what we love to do in this kingdom. Is that something that everyone can get behind? It is okay for all of us to have different opinions on this matter, and it is okay for this matter to be more emotional than logical because of the subject, because of what we're talking about. Mr. Chairman, the King now has started his own research, or the Crown's research, into this matter and the impact of slavery and their role in it. We ourselves, as a committee as well, need to do our research. We still need to do some work on the matter. A year ago, this Parliament passed a motion asking government to ensure that local heritage and history was taught in schools. That's a part of dismantling the legacies, because our children still don't know where they come from or who they are. So we have work to do too. All of this needs to be put in a proper perspective, with everyone's opinion being respected, but indeed something needs to be done, and we need to make sure more than anything is that the voices of associations like One SXM, but other voices are heard and listened to, and that both Parliament and government responds accordingly. When I think about reparatory justice, I also think about cultural institutions like our museum that have been neglected by everybody, you know, and institutions, the lack of a national archives. We need to do a lot more, and we not only have to demand of the Dutch government, but we have to demand of ourselves. And I think that this meeting was extremely important. As I said, in terms of the apology, regret should always be the case, but I am a proponent of an official apology, coming with a plan of approach, and not being rushed, especially when research needs to be done and voices need to be heard on all sides of this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Duncan. I see no other speakers at this time on this agenda point. Before going back over to the One SXM Foundation, I also want to chime in on behalf of our faction. The UP faction's position has been clear with regards to this apology situation. It was fortunate that at the IPCO that was held earlier this year, one of the good things that at least on that level, there was a discussion where there was a clear opportunity in the presence of the Dutch MPs and other stakeholders to state, well, what do we believe, and also ask questions. And most recently, I made a statement to kind of reiterate that, which was, I would like to reiterate the position of the UP party, which is something that was expressed at the IPCO, which is that an apology for slavery, in my opinion, cannot be done independently and without due consideration for reparation and rectification. I use those terms concurrently and purposely because, as has been mentioned, a lot of the focus has been on reparation. But the term rectification, and trying to find the appropriate word that I felt could encompass these 10 points from CARICOM, if you look at what a rectification is, so the reparation is indeed, okay, your financial component, your debt cancellation, and so on. In my opinion, a rectification is if you actually look online, you would get a rectification is a remedy whereby a court orders a change to reflect what it ought to have been in the first place. So let's say in legal terms, that's what you mean by a rectification. In this case, I would say this is where you covered by means of rectifications how you should have been educated, how you should have been developed, what your healthcare system should be at this point, what our history books should read, the psychological aspect, the trauma, mentality. The rectification aspect is also important, which is why our opinion is that an apology should be met simultaneously with a reparation and rectification. So to directly answer the question from the One SXM Association, if this apology is to MP Rolando Bryson, the apology is not accepted, because unless it fully complies with what I think is my definition of what a apology should be. And when I looked at it, is in line with the CARICOM's 10-point plan. No, it's not something that can be accepted. My question then to the One SXM to kind of similarly like we did in the first agenda point. You are constituents, you're an association of members, and you have posed a question to the members of parliament. I would like in this, let's say, second round for you to, in answering the questions of the members of parliament, once again pose, what would you, as our constituents, as this association, like to know from the members of parliament, those that would like to comment on it specifically? Would you like it to be addressed in the fashion that I did? This is what we would do with an apology. Is there further action to be recommended to the members of parliament and to parliament as a whole from the One SXM Association on this? In terms of, the question was already posed about the representation of whether it should be the king, the ministers, or so on. I do find it, I guess, ironic or strange that the minister, if I understand correctly, that would be coming to issue this apology is actually the Minister of Health of the Netherlands. And the Minister of Health, since being elected, has made various statements condemning St. Martin as the lowest vaccination rate in the Caribbean, and we should be doing better. Vaccine is important. And apparently maybe St. Martin is still safe enough for him to come, despite our very low vaccination rates, to then issue an apology. So I also want to ask, the choice of, when you, in the first part of the 10-point plan, it says full formal apology. Can you describe a little bit more what that should entail? Because as many have asked, we don't know what it is they even come in with. But maybe what you can help us with is set a standard for what it should entail, the apology part. We understand the other 9 points. What should a statement like that look like in a perfect world? I would love to hear that from the One SXM Association. Other than that, do you need some time to be able to answer the questions? You go straight into it. Will Alston go first? Or okay, Mr. Lawrence, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think answering, just to, I guess, to tie into the rest of our answers, yes, there has been frameworks made already for how a formal and national apology should look and what it should entail. And I think it will, Dr. Arundel will further go into that. But to answer the first question about who should make the apology, based on that exact same framework, it would have to be the king. This is the proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation that made the enslaved Africans in the Netherlands Antilles free. And it's in the name of His Gracious, the King. And so therefore, that's where the apology should come from. And that, yeah.
Can I just ask you to clarify? Because sometimes, even in our legislation, you see in the naam van de koning, you see in the name of the king. Is it specifically that this statement came from the king, or someone was mandated by the king to issue this proclamation?
It specifically says, in the month of October in the last year has been proclaimed in your island the law by which it pleased His Majesty the King to decree. So he decreed on the 1st of July, 1863, slavery should forever be abolished in Curacao and its dependent islands. And then further down, most heartily, I do congratulate you with the blessing being bestowed on you by the paternal care of the King. And sincerely, you may rejoice in the same. This is our freedom they're talking about, but you must also make yourself worthy of this benefit. So this is a decree by the king, and that is where the apology should come from. You want to go to the next one?
All right. In following up, and I'm gonna, if Mr. Chair, try to answer the questions as they were posed, but some of them are overlapping. So if you didn't hear your answer, please forgive me, but I think I will for all of you in the way I wrote them down. I wrote them down. So to start with the first one, I know my dear friend, I think I got a friend, MP Heiliger Martin, would like a report on the meeting with Van Huffelen. But since that was a private meeting, I'm going to have to decline in terms of the contents, but I think it will be incumbent upon the State Secretary to share. What I can say is that it was called, we were asked as One SXM to speak frankly, and we spoke very frankly. And, and we were given the space to be as candid as we could, and we were. I'll say that much, okay? So yes, with MP Sarah Westcott Williams' question, there are a couple of things. I'm going to try to fix everything, but I know there was a specific question. Is the association aware of any attempts by government and others to join? A few years ago, the Independence for St. Martin Foundation did approach the then Minister of Culture with the request to initiate a reparations commission. I had not too long come back from Antigua and speaking at their Emancipation Day night vigil on the issue of reparations, and I was invited by the Antigua and Barbuda Reparations Commission chair, and they had shared with us how they went about doing it, how it works within different territories in CARICOM. And so I came back very enthusiastically and we approached the minister, but we don't know if anything happened with that since then, because at that time, only governments could join the commission. And since then, however, CARICOM Reparations Commission has opened up the space so that NGOs can now apply and become formal members, and a number have already done so. And we were encouraged then by Dr. Vereen Shepherd, who also is the chair of the CERD committee at some point, to go ahead and submit our official request, and we have. We're constantly in communication with Dr. Hilary Brown, who is the current chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. And as far as we knew, we were supposed to be officially installed in October. That has not yet happened. And so we are awaiting the official installation of our membership as a member of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. We are in discussions with them. And so we haven't heard anything where government is concerned. It wasn't shared with us. And if that is the case, we didn't receive any information. So we're waiting our formal acceptance of our request. What we do know, what we can share, what we do know is that the discussion, rightfully so, MP Westcott Williams, is all over the place in the different territories, not just in St. Martin, and within CARICOM, because remember, Suriname is a member of CARICOM, and Suriname currently heads the Reparations Commission in CARICOM. So it's some interesting dynamics there. We do know that the president of the Suriname CARICOM Commission is in the Netherlands as we speak, having discussions with the Prime Minister. And we do know that some suggestions were made as to what the apology can look like. Whether or not the Dutch monarch will accept that, we don't know. But we know those are conversations that are taking place. That's what we are aware of. I don't know how much of this is public, but this is what we've been told. Yes, so my question then, so going back to everything that I've heard and putting it back together and summing up the conversation there with MP Westcott Williams in terms of what can or not be done, I will go into first, I'll come back to that if you permit me, Mr. Chair, Ms. MP Westcott, through you, sir, to go first, because I heard MP George, yourself, and some others about what should be or what should it entail or what does it need to look like. And we know what CARICOM is doing or saying or suggesting, but there's been a whole number of documents on this, that those of us who've been involved in this, there's extensive work done in terms of what the national apology, and I make reference to a document that was researched and edited. It is researched by Eniko Sands and Jeremy Tomlinson, and this is also available on the One SXM website. But the Facebook pages, I don't know the difference. But it is called National Apologies, Mapping the Complexities of Validity. And I'm going to read what a national apology should entail and some of the elements that are in there. And it states, as opposed to interpersonal apologies exchanged between individuals, a collective apology is both made on behalf of and directed to identifiable communities. It is political because it is made by or through political or social institutions and for past wrongdoings of political character. Furthermore, they are a particular kind of collective political apologies in that the source of the apology is a modern nation state. And so they are also described as intrastate because they are intended for communities from the same country instead of being made among states. That is their definition of what it looks like in terms of its makeup. I think I've named a number of the elements, but some very important ones, and I think MP Duncan mentioned that important one of regret. So there is publicity. So when we look at the form of what it should look like, there's publicity, there's official character, there's ceremony, and then there is the status of the speaker and the political representation. That those are very important elements that need to go in. And then where content is concerned, there is acknowledgement, and we have been asking for the acknowledgement of slavery as a crime against humanity. That is step number one. Then there is reckoning, there is naming, there is regret, there is responsibility. That is the other one that seems to be missing here. Expression of remorse. Difference than a regret statement. And Sir Hilary Beckles have been on the trail of the reparations movement, trying to explain the difference between statements of regret versus, true expressions of remorse. Non-repetition. So your action, your current actions, your future actions should indicate that this will never happen again. And can we say that is the case with the actions of the Dutch state as we speak? Repudiation and Ukraine. And then refraining from appeals for forgiveness. An interesting one because, we'll see how this one goes down. And then where the procedure is concerned, further action, sincerity. So there should be further symbolic reparation. That's number one in terms of the sincerity. In our view, already saying that this will have no discussion about reparation is not sincere. It does not live up to the standards of further symbolic reparation. Consistency, where corrective actions need to be taken. And then the final one, material compensation. And I want to get back to this conversation about debt cancellation, MP Ponteflet and others. We have been saying, if you read the 10-point action plan, again, you'll see the same thing. Money or the check, and those of us in the movement over the decades, we recognize the importance of money. We're not stupid. We understand it. But we're saying it's not the only component, and you cannot let it be the thing that draws us all the time, because that's how easy it is to dangle the carrot in front of us. Some believe that we will fall for it, and then everything will be okay. So we have to be very careful where that is concerned. And so I get back to my question, or in answering the questions, maybe I'm posing a further question, basically is, will Parliament accept the apology? That's my question, because I believe that Parliament can and has a role to play in rejecting this apology. Is it important? Is it too difficult? Can Parliament not convene an urgent extraordinary meeting not to accept the apology on December 19th? At least in my view, until Parliament itself is briefed on this conversation, because from what we're hearing is that Parliament doesn't have content, doesn't know what's going to happen, is not sure. I'm saying, but can Parliament not then convene an urgent meeting and say, hold off on this apology until we have further information? So that would be my answer in terms of what do we want? We're asking Parliament to tell government, to instruct government to reject this apology. At least not now, at least not at this stage, in this content, the way it was put, not even the way it was rushed together. Up to today, we have asked about every person that we can think of, why December 19th? And we have no answer. It seems to be a very mysterious date. I'm sure somewhere somebody has an answer to that, but we have not been able to find that. So yes, we've been waiting for a few hundred years for true reparatory justice. We believe we can wait a little further, especially in the context that it was mentioned that His Majesty, the King, is going to do his own independent research to see how much of the goods in his possession are stolen or taken by force, and it's going to take at least 3 years to conclude that investigation. I would at least ask that we at least wait that long to produce a solid report on how we feel about a true informal apology, or what we think it should look like for St. Martin. Thank you.
Thank you for that elucidation. Are there any other members of parliament wish the floor at this time? I do not see any need. I think we've heard and understood the position of One SXM and what they are asking or encouraging of the members of parliament. I think the One SXM you've heard or not heard or whatever, you've been a part of the discussion that has taken place within this committee in regards to the question you've posed. I think I would like to thank you for the information you've provided, for the efforts you've made, and I think it is important for all members of parliament to then decide what we, not only individually, but collectively as a parliament, will do with this information. Before closing, I do want to point out, I was just kind of checking as you were talking about, how some apologies are done. And interestingly enough, when the Dutch had apologized, the first apology that was ever given to Indonesia was first done in 2006 by the foreign minister. Then 14 years later, King Willem-Alexander apologized, and then most recently, Rutte apologized again. Those are the three moments which Indonesia was apologized. Now, I preface this to say that as atrocious as what has happened to Indonesia is, I am not one to now compare slavery versus war. But I just say that to say there is this sort of precedent. Another thing that I want to point out that I would like to leave with you and the members of the committee is that, I don't know if you've thought about it like this, but there's another group of people that are also not happy with this apology. And those are in the Netherlands that do not even think we deserve an apology. And it's unfortunate and highly prevalent in the highest levels. Yesterday, I was totally shocked and disgusted to see a statement from Mr. Geert Wilders on all of his social media. And he was very critical of Kaag individually because Minister Kaag of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister, is traveling to Suriname to give the apology. And he stated, maar jullie verdienen geen slavernij-excuses. Zwarte Piet blijft. Het woord en, I'm not going to say the word here, wordt niet verboden. En naar geld kunnen jullie allemaal fluiten. I say this and I've discussed this with you. I don't believe that this is the sentiment of all Dutch people. Absolutely not. Like I've discussed sometimes, I know people in the Netherlands, Caucasian, European, Netherlands, that are disgusted with this sort of statement. But let us not underestimate the fact that the man that is currently leading the polls, currently in the Netherlands, with the highest seats, PVV, 21 seats in the polls, has made this statement. And if you read the comments, you'll be shocked to see how many people agree. We have a lot of challenges and differences between us, and it's not that we can just simply ignore that there's big differences from some people as to what an apology should entail, whether we even deserve an apology, what an apology should go for. But I think what I take from this meeting today is that we have our own responsibility to decide for ourselves. They can say what they want, but as MP George put it very perfectly, they can apologize when they want. It's up to us to decide whether we accept or not. And that's why I thank you for bringing this information to the Parliament of St. Martin, to this committee, and I look forward to using this information in our own deliberations and our own stances that we take as members of Parliament and as Parliament of St. Martin. So I thank you very much for being here. Members of Parliament, this meeting will be adjourned because the first agenda point, we still, as a formality, will decide on that petite committee/work group. It's possible that we will have to have that in a future meeting and then maybe have some informal discussions in the meantime on how we will set that up. Once again, thank you all for your attention in this meeting, and I hereby adjourn this meeting.